What a great intro. I might have thought I'd written it, which I did. So I'm Greg Major. Just a couple of points of clarification, if I may. One is that on my business card it says technical sales, not today. Not doing any selling today. Today I'm just sharing information. And you may wonder why on the running notes and in the introduction it was mentioned that I'm working for Teltherm. Well, Teltherm and Homeisham's are sister companies, so the same gentleman that owns Teltherm owns Homeisham's, and sometimes we work together and sometimes we work alone, and today obviously we're working together. So the purpose of today is I wanted to share with you some information about some newish digital gauges that have particular applicability to the water industry. I nearly said 3 waters, which would have been a disaster. I mean local water done right. So we're going to talk about the Additel gauges. Additel is an American company, obviously not built in America, thank goodness. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's one of my customers using a gauge to do hydrostatic testing on a pipe. So you pressurize the pipe, well you know how hydrostatic testing works, and then you download the data over time, and you can produce certificates. If you just pass a few of those back, here's some examples of some certificates that we've actually produced from real data, just to give you an idea of what you can get from them. Some of you may have used the previous model, the 680. Anybody used the 680 gauge before, the logging Wi-Fi gauge? No? Okay, well that'll make it easy. So there are 2 models in the range. There is the small brother, the 680, and its big brother, the 681. And I just want to go through and tell you about the key features of them. I was going to compare and contrast with the old model to the new, but especially since there's not much experience with the old one, I'll just go over the features in general with the gauges. At the end there'll be a question time, obviously, if you have some questions. So we'll start with the 680. There are actually 5 gauges in the family, but 2 of them, and perhaps 3, are applicable to the water industry. So I'll talk about these 2 and then I'll show you the 3rd at the end if it comes up. So the claim to fame of these gauges is that they are logging and they're wireless. So it makes life very easy. The fact that they're IP67 means that you can put them outside, leave them for 12 hours, 18 hours. In the example of those sheets you're passing around, I think you recorded for about 18 hours, and that's quite fine. I'm sure you're all aware of how the ingress protection works, the IP67, the first digit solids, the second digit water. As you probably know, the first digit with solids, 0 is no protection against solid. Number 2 is a finger, and believe it or not, there is an IEC calibrated finger you can buy for testing ingress. 7 means that in theory we can put this underwater for a meter for up to 30 minutes. So it really is quite waterproof. You can put it outside without any concern at all. The gauge has a hell of a lot of memory. This particular one has 400,000 records, which you would think would be enough for anybody. But interestingly enough, I had a call last week from a chap who wanted the big brother of the 681 because he needed more than 400,000. I have no idea why, but there you are. It's available in 2 accuracies, either 0.1% of full scale or 0.2% of full scale. And you'll see on the next models there is other accuracies available. As I say, 400,000 recordings. All the wetted surfaces are 316L stainless steel. Compared to the old model, 316L has a slightly lower carbon content and is better at dealing with corrosion post-welding. So the choice of 316L is excellent. So any of your chemicals that are compatible with 316 and certainly 316L are going to be fine with the gauge. Each of the gauges, except for the number 3, which I'll touch on at the end, comes with an ISO 17025 calibration certificate. ISO 17025 is the standard that IANs work to, as you probably know. So at least for probably the first 12 months, you won't need to get a calibration done. Let me just go back a second. The original model used to have a little dongle like this, and it would communicate that way. And we did quite well selling spare dongles because obviously they got lost quite a lot. The new gauges have Bluetooth, and that's a major benefit. It means you have no dongle, and it means you communicate with your laptop or with your phone, and in fact with a desktop as well, provided it has Bluetooth. And if you don't, PB Tech, $20, you've got Bluetooth on your desktop. They're fully temperature compensated over a big range, rather more than the previous model also. As we know, pressure and temperature are closely linked, a la Boyle's law. And we go to -20 here, we used to go to -10. So I guess they must have thought of South Canterbury winters, which can get down there. Display digits can be 4 or 5. And in terms of sampling, it can go from either a very fast 10 times per second up to whatever you want. Okay, the 681 is the big brother. So what are the advantages in moving further up the range? Well, the first one is you have a separate sub-display here on which you can display things like percentage of full scale. You can display a tear reading, so you can set it to 0. Several other things you can display separately there. But I guess the big benefit you get is the higher accuracy. So where the 680A, the smaller model of the range, is available in either 0.1 or 0.2% of full-scale accuracy, the 681A, the big brother, is available in 0.05% of full scale, 0.02% of full scale, or 0.1% of reading. And I'll touch on in a moment why the difference is important, because some people wonder why don't we always do reading, and I'll cover that off. The other options you have, I just noticed we can't spell barometer, but there is an option on the Big Brother that we can add a barometer, which allows us to have absolute pressure. Does everybody know about absolute pressure, or do you want me to explain it? I'll go ahead and give you a brief précis into it. If you took out a normal gauge and held it in the air right now, it would show 0 psi or 0 kPa or 0 pascals. But in real terms, there is pressure on us. We live at the bottom of a sea of air. So when you look at the weather on the news at night, if anybody still watches the news, you'll see things like 1,015 hectopascals. So that's the total pressure of the air that's upon us. So sometimes you need to have absolute pressure. For example, if you were in a situation, probably not much in the water industry, but if you were pulling a great huge vacuum, most commonly you'll see that read out in millimeters of mercury, which is a minus figure. But if you get to an extremely low vacuum, you might measure up from an absolute vacuum. That is like the vacuum in deep space. So if you add the barometer as an option, there's a couple of accuracies available. Now, in terms of logging potential or logging size, you've got 10 million records, and I can't imagine any time that 10 million is not going to be enough to cover kind of any situation. Why do we sometimes talk about percentage of full scale as opposed to percentage of reading? Is a question I get quite a lot. The concept is it's just two different ways of measuring the same thing. Neither is better or worse, they're just different ways of measuring the same information. If we take, for example, a very common gauge that we sell, which is the 20 bar, And if we compare, for example, on the blue scale, 0.1% of reading to this gauge, which is 0.05% of full scale. Now you may ask, why is he comparing 0.05 with 0.1? The reason is, and this is the only time I'll mention price, those two gauges are the same price, so it is a good comparison. If we look, if we look at the possible error, so on the y-axis we have the potential error in bar, and along the on the x-axis we have the 20 bar pressure range. And we see that with the percent of full scale, you will always have up to 0.01 bar error. Whereas if we look at the percent of reading, we see that the error changes depending on where it's read. So that if you were measuring in the lower half of the graph, you would have more accuracy with the 0.1 of reading. If you're measuring in the top half, you would get more accuracy with the 0.05 of full scale. And that's the background to why we do that. It is possible to get the gauges without logging. I would say that it's potentially sort of being a little bit of a waste because the logging is such a powerful feature. But we do sell some without logging. So that's another option. Again, I mentioned sales, sorry, my bad. But you can get them with or without logging, but most people, to be fair, get it with. I'll mention the third gauge because I'm running way ahead of time. The third gauge is this one. So, sorry, I didn't show you. In reality, we saw the two gauges, the 680A, the 681A. I'll mention this one as well. This is called the 601EX. Normally when you put an explosion-proof label on something, you double the cost. This one's actually really good value. This one is 0.5% of full-scale accuracy. So it's a lower accuracy, but it's still extremely good. And I can't talk about price, but it's good. So we have that one as well. The only difference is this one does not come with the ISO 17025 calibration cert. So if you need the calibration, arguably you're better with these two. I'll show you a couple of examples of a thing in use. So as I said, you can either go to a PC or to a phone, either Apple or Android. And I'll show you first some examples of using the gauge on a PC, just to show you how easy it is. This is the main screen you'll get to when you connect to the PC. By the way, connecting to a PC, you've got two choices. You've either got the Bluetooth, which is what most people are going to do. On this model, you've got RS-232. So you can connect to a PC wired if you want to do it that way as well. If you go to somewhere like PB Tech, for example, $30 will buy you a RS-232 to USB connector, so that's easy. And in the case of the big brother, the 601, we still have the RS-232, but we also have a USB-C. And the USB-C can be both to transfer data between the gauge and the computer and also run it on power. The battery life is enormous, so you probably wouldn't need to, but just if you needed to for some reason, it will run it on the USB-C power as well. The lowest cost one, the 601EX, has no USB or RS-232 or anything because it is explosion proof, and obviously you wouldn't want to be plugging things in an explosion proof environment. So, sorry, back to where I was at. Here we have the screen you'll get when you connect to the PC, whether or not you connect to by Bluetooth or by USB. If you have several gauges, you'll get a screen that shows several. Again, if you have a look at, if you talk to the guys on stand 25, that's the combo Teltherm Homersham stand, you can see, and we can show you the three gauges I have here connected to a phone. But this is the screen you'll get on a PC. You get all the information about the gauge, the model number, the ratings, the battery strength. Any settings you want to change, you can do here. and it's a lot easier than fiddling around with buttons. I'm sure you've all played with buttons on the front of things, and they're a bit of a pain in the body to do. By having it all in here, it makes life very easy, so we can change unit of measure from pascals to whatever. We can sync system time, so the time on the gauge will be the same as the time on the computer, so if you're recording other data, etc. And this is your live readout. So if this was a live screen, we'd be seeing the actual pressure at the moment. And just remember, when you're doing it, once you've changed those things, remember to hit save, and it will send that data to the PC. If you don't hit save, to the gauge, that is. If you don't hit save, it won't send it to the gauge. And here, as you've seen, hopefully you've all seen that those certificates I've handed out. You get a graph, and you get statistical data like this, which is pretty wonderful. You get all the data, including the serial number. You get a start value, an end value, a min max, an average, and even things like the standard deviation from the average. So it's pretty powerful. So if you're doing something for a customer, or even for your own records, you can have a really good certificate to put on file, and you get a graph like so. I quite like the phone interface probably better than the PC. The phone interface gives you a nice colourful display. It gives you a graph that's actually live, which I quite like. I was showing some guys on the stand before. So if you connect up to the gauge and you start blowing into it or doing some sort of testing, you'll see the graph changing straight away, even if you're not logging. And it's simply a matter of hitting the record button, and it will start to log to the phone. Bluetooth has a range of, give or take, it's Bluetooth 5.2, so you've got about 10 meters of range typically. You just hit record, it starts to download. Once you're finished, this button changes from record to stop, and it asks you, do you want to download the data? And you can very easily do that. And again, you get the same information, you get a nice graph like so, and you get numerical outputs as well with all that same statistical data. The red line is temperature, by the way, because again, just to touch on Boyle's law, as we all know, temperature and pressure are inexorably linked. So to have it all temperature compensated, it also records the ambient temperature, which is pretty useful. One tip and trick with the software. I'm sure all of you who've used Windows have come across UAC, you know, the thing that gets in the way when you try and install something, and it says, are you sure you want to install this? Or, we don't know this program, we don't think you should install it. This is a new one I've only seen for the first time on these Additel gauges. Because the gauges are made in China, like an iPhone, it's designed in America, made in China. Thank goodness, because of various tariffs and things. But anyway, Microsoft in their best wisdom have brought up another UAC prompt that stops you installing. So when you go to install the software, where you would normally you download the zip file, as you always would with most programs. Instead of just right-clicking and going unzip all, extract all, you right-click and select Properties, and you click the Unblock button. Apply or OK, and then unzip as normal. If I ever have someone ring me up and say, oh, I've installed the software and it's not working properly, it's always that. So just keep that in mind. It's just Microsoft being overzealous. There are lots of filters you can choose. You can choose, obviously, especially if you're with a client, having the numbers flick over continuously, even if the pressure is genuinely changing, is confusing and sometimes perturbing for your client. So you can choose a way to average some samples. You can choose 3, 5, 6, 9 samples that will average across those. So if you choose 3 samples, it'll take 3 of the last readings and amortize across them. It's also got first order, which amused me as a Star Wars fan, but not the evil first order. In the analog world, a first order filter means that for every octave increase, you roll off by 6 decibels. In the digital world, it simply means it takes the sample at time n and compares it with sample at time n minus 1 and applies a smoothing factor, which is the alpha symbol. But by the by. But you would use the first order filter if you were in an environment where there was noise coming through, and perhaps you had, if you had a noisy situation where you were getting some sort of weird figures coming up, and you might have a huge amount of noise, and that's what that's for. Don't worry too much about the formula. So some of you who have been around a while will have seen the old-fashioned hydrostatic testers with a paper chart, and for many years that was de rigueur, and basically this replaces them. Okay, questions? Nothing. All right. Well, that was nice and easy. So they're available from several places. So talk to your local distributor and we'd be happy to help you. Thanks very much.